Heraclon Publishing presents Dime Crime, Volume 3, This One's Trouble. Written by Peter Sellers. Narrated by Mark Hebscher. Backroom Boys. At 1:30, after the backroom had closed, Kevin served us draft beer in coffee cups. We could have drunk from bottles because no cops ever came, but Kevin had been well brought up and liked to break the law discreetly. The back room was a live music club at the rear of an Italian joint on Bloor Street, across the road from the Royal Conservatory of Music. I didn't work there myself. I had a job in a bookstore on Yonge Street at St. Clair, but I was drinking a fair amount in those days, and the back room was as good a place as any to do it. The music was okay most of the time. Occasionally, Kevin would slip me free food, and it seemed like a good place to meet chicks. Sometimes, after hours, the musicians would stick around, try out new tunes, and tell stories about life on the road. When they talked about the number of girls they'd had, I got to wishing I could play an instrument. Unfortunately, I wasn't musical. In grade 4, when every kid had to be in the choir, the teacher took me aside and told me just to mouth the words. The musicians would describe gigs they played, from yacht club dances to bars in northern Ontario with screens in front of the stage to protect them from beer bottles and draft glasses. One balladeer, who sang of peace and romantic love, was booked into such a place by an unhappy accident. When the bottles would reach him, the locals pressed their faces against the screen and spat at him. "Thank you," he'd say after each booed song. "I'm so glad you like that one. Here's another new tune you might enjoy." Kevin had run the back room since spring. He had made the leap from waiter to manager on the strength of one stroke of good fortune. His girlfriend had previously gone out with the piano player for the band Jerry Spoon and the Tectonic Plates. The Plates played 3 nights a week at the Victoria Hotel, a rundown dive at Queen and Soho. Every night, the residents of the hotel sat at a round table in front of the stage getting drunk and noisy. The rest of the crowd was loud and mostly pissed, and the owner, a former CFL fullback, kept in shape by physically throwing out the most rowdy. Jerry and the band wanted a better gig. Kevin saw his chance. The backroom's music budget was $400 a week. For one guy and a guitar, that wasn't bad. For a 5-piece band, it was laughable, even in 1977. But Jerry and the boys were so anxious to get out of the Victoria that they took the offer with little haggling. The usual working week was Tuesday to Saturday, 4 sets a night, from 9 till 1. The Plates would play Tuesday, and they got all the food and beer they could consume. That was sure to add up to more than $400, but Kevin figured it was worth it. From the first Wednesday night, the back room was jammed. Spoon and the Plates drew students from the University of Toronto residences and from the frat houses of the Annex, all within easy crawling distance. There was no cover charge, and the beer prices weren't bad. That week, the owners made more money than they'd ever in one week before. They thanked Kevin by telling him to make sure it continued. The first thing he did was to offer the Plates 2 more weeks. Over the previous 7 days, Jerry had become a shrewder businessman. The band agreed for $800 a week. With the success of the Plates, people started paying attention to the back room. Singers phoned looking for gigs. Kevin didn't have to settle for whoever he could get. He was able to hire some of the brightest lights of the Canadian folk scene. Jackie Washington played the back room. So did David Wilcox, Willie P. Bennett, and a 14-year-old guitar hotshot who had to be smuggled in the back door and who filled the place by word of mouth. He's now a big deal in Nashville. Kevin would bring in the odd classical player from the conservatory. There was a wicked lutenist named Geordie, some impressive violin players, and the occasional classical guitarist who had chops, but none of them was as good a draw as the folk and blues musicians. The classical players didn't have loyal fans who would come every night and drink too much. Someone who did have fans was Tom Lieberman. Tom had been a frontman for the legendary rock band that almost made it big. An excellent guitar player with a powerful, quirky voice, he wrote songs that were too offbeat for AM radio. But the group got a lot of local club gigs for a while, and he was the house band at a strip joint in the days of G-strings and an MC between peelers. When the band came apart, Tom took up acoustic guitar and reinvented himself as a folk club and coffeehouse performer. Like the Plates, Tom had a dedicated following. He was also just back in town after 8 months in Vancouver. Kevin reasoned that people who hadn't heard Tom for a while would jump at the chance. Tom had surprised Kevin with his phone call. "This is Lieberman." Kevin stayed professional. "Uh-huh," he said. "I want to play at your establishment," Tom said. "I understand you pay $400. That's fine. Next week suits me." Kevin had a female duo booked for the following week. I was keen on the tambourine player. I have something lined up, said Kevin, who was a good friend. I'm sure you can be persuasive, Tom replied. Kevin shifted the duo's booking by giving them a second week and the promise of more time on the road. When he called Tom back to confirm, the singer said, "Good, I'll take cash in advance." Kevin figured that having Tom on the bill was going to pay off, so he said yes. Knowing that the tambourine player would be around for a second week made me happy too. It was obvious that Tom didn't want to be a singer anymore. His deal called for 4 sets of at least 30 minutes each. He timed each set to the second. Sometimes he'd check his watch in the middle of a tune, see that his half hour was up, and stop playing. "That's enough of this delightful ditty," he'd say, and then leave the bandstand. Behind the bar was a small employees-only parking area with a larger public lot behind it. A low wooden fence divided the two, and on nights when the weather was fine, Tom would perch there between sets and talk if someone else was there, or write if he was alone. While out west, Tom had published a collection of delicate poems called Lover Man. Gerald Haney in the Toronto Star said the book contained luminous poems of lust and yearning. There was a rave in the Globe and Mail, and Now claimed it was a profound work of deep insight that stands with the best of Leonard Cohen and Gwendolyn McEwen. Tom did readings whenever he could, selling copies from the stage, but it was hardly a living. The only other remarkable skill he had was making music, so he played as infrequently as he could get away with and still stay fed. Kevin was one of the few people who would give Tom work on his terms. One night, a woman I had not seen before came in and sat at the table in the corner furthest from the bar. Tom was tuning his guitar and did not notice her, but I did. Even though the corner was dimly lit, I could tell she was good-looking. I went over. "Can I sit here?" I asked. Her eyes were fixed on Tom. "I'm with the band," she said. I thought she was joking. Friends of band members always sat near the stage, but Tom never had girlfriends or groupies come out when he was playing. He was strictly business. I looked at Tom, on his stool with a quart of old Vienna on the floor beside him, as he plucked and bellowed. I looked at the woman again, but the way she was watching Tom told me my prospects were slim. I doubt she noticed when I left. After the set, I went out back. "There's somebody here to see you," I said to Tom. "They're all here to see me." "I don't think she's just anybody." I described her. "Where's she sitting?" As I told him, he took out a pack of cigarettes and lit one. I looked at my watch. It was time for Tom to go back on. Scrupulous as he was about ending his sets on the dot, he was just as precise about starting on time. "Coming in?" I asked. "I'll be along," he said. 10 minutes later he came in. His next set was subdued, all tender ballads. He hardly spoke, and he kept looking into the far corner of the room, but he wouldn't have made out much. He'd be able to tell if someone was there, but no more. There was nothing to see by then anyway. When I'd come in from the parking lot, she was gone. The first 2 nights he played the back room, Tom read poetry during his sets. "This ain't a goddamn literary salon," one of the owners said to Kevin. "Tell that goofy bastard to kill the lovey-dovey shit and sing." Surprisingly, Tom obliged. Kevin struck a compromise with him. Other performers sold their homemade cassettes from the stage, so Tom could sell his book. Every night he'd carve a few minutes out of each short set. "I have copies available for just $2.50. Is it worth it, you ask?" Indubitably. This inspiring volume includes words like succulent, evanescent, languid, and voluptuous. In fact, reading aloud from this book is guaranteed to get you laid. If it doesn't, my friend, then nothing will except cash money. That's why I'm not permitted to read aloud from the book this evening. The proprietors feel the orgy that is certain to ensue and the subsequent descent of the morality squad. He'd go on in that matter for 3 or 4 minutes before starting another song. He sold a book or two every single time. The week after Tom, the female folk duo came in. I was looking forward to watching Pat, the tambourine player, bang and rattle for 2 weeks. She had long dark hair and wore flowing ankle-length skirts that she made herself out of flamboyant fabrics. She'd sing and shake her head, setting her earrings jingling in time to the music. I was mesmerized. The second night they played, I'd had enough beer to make me relaxed, but too much to let me remain cautious. I asked her out. She said no. When I told Kevin how I fared, he said, "It's those skirts she wears. I bet there's something wrong with her legs." For the next 10 days, I stayed away from the back room. I know when I'm not wanted. Tom was friendly when he wasn't on stage. Out back between sets, he'd talk about politics, literature, and the rise of the Philistine. At the time, I wanted to be a writer too, although not a poet. I saw there wasn't much money in that. I wanted to be a novelist. Tom was the only published author I knew, so he seemed like a good person to talk to. I worked up the nerve to ask him to look at a manuscript I'd completed. "I'll take a gander," he said, "scribble a few notes." "I'll bring it tomorrow." I wanted to ask him how quickly he'd be able to look at it, as I was young and anxious, but that seemed pushy. Instead, I decided to curry favor. "Can you read me one of your poems?" "What kind of poetry do you like?" he asked. In school, teachers had read The Ancient Mariner and Prufrock and My Last Duchess by Browning. Each had been exciting, but I had no idea how to answer him. "All kinds," I said. He shook his head. "That's not good enough." "But I don't know." "That's crap. You do know. You just don't have the guts to say it. You need a definite opinion, and you need to be tough enough to stick by it. Here's a poem for you." He took a long drag on his cigarette, then spun it away through the darkness. He breathed in and recited, "If I could take a soft-tipped pen and gently trace the course of your freckles, from next to next to next, like numbered dots in a child's puzzle book, they would reveal to me not an image of bird in flight or wind-blown tree, but instead a richer secret, a chart to the center of love." Then the clapping started. It was slow and sarcastic from the darkness of the public parking lot. The woman from the corner table walked towards us. "How lovely," she said. "Hello, Debbie," Tom said. "That was beautiful, Tom." She moved past us and through the back door. As she opened it, framed in the light from inside, I thought again how good-looking she was. I was so used to Tom's perfectly timed sets that the next night I knew instantly something was wrong. At 9:35, he was still playing. At 10 o'clock, too. He played all night, sometimes the same song 2 or 3 times. He didn't mention his poetry book. He hardly talked at all. It was almost like a 4-hour medley. Debbie was sitting in her usual seat. She looked at her watch as often as Tom usually checked his. "When does he take a break?" she asked me. "I don't know." "Isn't he violating his contract if he doesn't?" That was unlikely. Usually Tom played so little that he owed the place a few extra tunes. "I want to talk to the manager," she said. When I reported this to Kevin, he shook his head. "I'm busy," he said. Around 11, Debbie slipped out. When I left her after midnight, she was across the street, watching the front door, partially obscured by a lamppost. I bought a copy of Tom's book, and he signed it for me, the first signed book I'd ever owned. "Someday you'll know," he wrote. It wasn't warm and friendly, but it also wasn't one of those phony inscriptions you get from authors you've met for 10 seconds at a bookstore signing. I still have that book, and often I open it at random and read a poem or two. I've done that so much that the binding has come loose. I watched a group of girls who had come in together and had been nursing beers slowly and laughing. They'd been in the back room before, and once one of them had smiled at me. She looked like she appreciated poetry, and I wanted to see if the seductive power Tom talked about was true. I picked what seemed the ideal poem, drained my beer, and went to their table. "Hi there," I said. The girls seemed surprised that I'd approached them. I still think there was a sense of eager anticipation in the air, but with all of them looking at me, I was struck dumb, so I started reading. "In silence, from my seat behind the microphone, I watch you, as you watch, for your friend to return. And if he does not, if there is indeed a God, is there hope that those eyes would watch for me?" I gave her a wistful look, figuring she'd take the cue. Instead, they all laughed and started clapping. Other people turned to see what was going on. Then the girl I was interested in held out her hand. I was thrilled. Tom's poem had worked. I reached out towards her, but instead of grasping my fingers, she pressed a quarter into my palm. One night in mid-September, I was out back thinking about school. I'd just started 4th year, and I was having trouble seeing the point of it. My second novel was coming along fine. I was pounding out 10 pages a day on my Underwood portable. Once I got feedback from Tom, who'd need school? A car pulled up just over the fence from me in the public lot. Caught by the headlights, I felt exposed and trapped like a POW slipping under the wire. When the high beam switched on, I held my hand up to shield my eyes. Jesus! I moved out of the lights to the driver's window. It was a '68 Parisienne convertible with its long hood, massive V8, and a trunk you could use to move a living room suite. Debbie was at the wheel. "What are you doing?" I asked, blinking. "Looking for Tom," she said. "He's not here. Not this week. Not next." I don't think she heard me. She sat staring straight ahead into the pool of light. One Saturday, Tom asked me to drive him home. He had been storing 2 boxes of books in a backroom closet, and he wanted to take them. "I may want to take off again for a while," he explained. "Back out west? Maybe Newfoundland, maybe the Yukon. I've never been, and it's a great country for poets." Tom lived on the second floor of one of those old mansions along Jarvis Street. Once the homes of the local gentry, these stately buildings had been converted to restaurants or rooming houses. I parked out front. While Tom took his guitar, his harmonica case, a set of bongos, and a small amplifier out of the back seat, I opened the trunk and picked up the books. Considering how slim the individual volumes were, 2 boxes of them added up. I perched the boxes on the rear bumper, bracing them with my leg while I reached up to shut the trunk. Then I hefted the box again and turned towards Tom's house. He was at the front door and had set his guitar and amplifier down. He was talking to Debbie, who stood to the side of the door out of the porch light. "I've missed you, Tom," she said. "Then you need to work on your aim," he said, with no humor. He spread his arms, still holding the bongos and the harmonicas. "I'm a big target." "Don't make fun, Tom. Haven't you done enough already?" "Look, Debbie," he said, "whatever you think I did, it was a long time ago. Let's just get on with who we are and where we're going." His voice was soft, the way you talk to a child or someone who's suicidal. "You say that, Tom, but you don't move on. What are those?" She pointed at the boxes I was holding, which were growing steadily heavier. "Tom's book," I said, not realizing it was a rhetorical question. "You see, Tom, you carry me with you." I was tempted to point out that I was the one doing the carrying, but I let it pass. "You know you want me. That's why you took so much of me." "Look, Debbie," Tom said, "I'm a poet. I take stuff that happens in my life and use it. It's nothing personal. I've done it with my parents, friends, and other lovers." "So, raping other people's emotions is okay, as long as you do it often enough?" "No, Tom, you want me. You need me. Try as hard as you like, you can't give me up." She took a step forward. In the light now, I noticed her freckles. "Why else did you come home from Vancouver?" Tom took a step back and shook his head. "Look, Debbie," he said, again, but added nothing to it. She took another step forward, and this time he stood his ground. "You came back for me." "No, Debbie, I didn't come back for you. I don't want